Come, spellweavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin Bones with Ryan Howard, where we are making old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and joining me this evening for my last show before North Texas RPG Convention, I've got someone who there's been a lot of demand, for him to make a return appearance. Someone you guys all know and love. He is the creator of Hyperborea. He is the proprietor of Northwind Adventures. He is the one, the only Jeffrey Talanian. He is back tonight to talk to us about a Kickstarter that he has going on right now for Hyperborea called just called Modulistic Terror. It is 3 adventures for Hyperborea. I will let him kind of explain what you get there. Before we bring him on, though, I want to remind everyone to like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoy what we do here on Rollin Bones and really want to help and support us, that's one of the best ways to do so is just by giving us that little like and then, sharing the stream with your friends and subscribing if you're not already subscribed. Also want to remind everyone that you can find me on various social media platforms, including X and Instagram, where I am at Howard_Ryan Gregg. Shout out to those of you who are watching us on X right now. Thank you for using that platform. And, you can also find me at Twitch, twitch.tv/RollinBonesRyan. And then Substack is rollinbones.substack.com. That has become the primary home for my session reports on my Axe game, which is set in the world of Nighthaven, the world that my part of Guts and Glory is set in. So, if you want to read a little bit about Nighthaven, get a little bit of a sense of what's going on there, that's where you can do so over on my Substack. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on the man, the myth, the legend. You'll find his Twitter handle here at Hyperborea576. And of course, once again, the creator of Hyperborea, the proprietor of Northwind Adventures, Mr. Jeffrey Talanian. Welcome back to Rollin Bones.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. I love it.
Cool. So I don't want to bury the lead here. You've got a campaign going on right now. These are 3 adventure modules that are set within the world of Hyperborea using the Hyperborea rule set. You guys can find the link here in the chat. You'll find it in the description below this video. Tell us a little bit about what's included in this campaign.
Sure. So, like you said, it's 3 new adventure modules. One of them is called The Vanishing Isles of the Summer King, and another one is called The Oblation Slab of the Hepatomancer, and the last one is called 1,000 Eyes of Thaumagoria. And each of these is a new adventure module that not only functions as an adventure, but also functions as a light expansion of the setting itself. So while you can use these adventures maybe with other systems, they are intended for Hyperborea and take place in some part of Hyperborea. And in the case of the Vanishing Isles of the Summer King, it's a bit of a jump to if the player characters survive it's a jump to Poseidon, which is basically Neptune, and it's also a jump to a moon of Saturn. So that one's all over the place. And each one of them is written by a different author. So the Oblation Slab of the Hepatomancer is written by my dear old friend Joe Mack. It is sort of a necromancer-themed adventure, hepatomancy being a sort of dark sorcery in which the necromancer takes the sacrificial victim. It could be a human or an animal, and draws the entrails out and reads them to divine the future. And so that's this evil necromancer's living in this in these woodlands that are basically a border between the nation of the Celts and the nation of the Vikings, and it's been an area that's been under some conflict in the setting of Hyperborea through the centuries. And so he's sort of placed there, and that module will be a saddle stitch, typical module like we've done in the past, 8.5 by 11 type of module. And then, but the next two, the Thousand Eyes of Thaumagoria and the Vanishing Isles of the Summer King, those are both going to be hardcover books, because they went beyond the page count of a normal saddle stitch type of adventure book. Yeah, so it's going to be cool. They're going to be in the same sort of high quality offset printing that we've done in the past with all our rules books, in which we have Smithstone binding and thick paper stock, and just quality illustrations and layout throughout. So each of these adventures are different. The Thousand Eyes of Thaumagoria, which you see right there, that's written by Ben Ball. Ben has been an amazing peer of mine, working on Hyperborea material for several years now. He's done a lot with contributing to the rules books, and he wrote a very popular adventure of ours years ago called Beneath the Comet. And so this one has been in the works for a while. It takes place in a land called the Scarrig Coast, and it's a land that is dominated by orcs. And where these orcs live in this sort of mountainous woodland area, this warlord has set up a keep where he is mining these precious salts. And this type of salt is worth an incredible amount of gold, and it is quite rare and valuable. And so he has set up shop there, and he's right on the border of the orcs. And it becomes sort of a mystery as to why the orcs haven't attacked him yet. He's been there for 3 years, and so he's seeking adventurers to go out and find one of his earlier expeditions that he sent out into the orcish lands to see what is going on in this area. And as these things go, one thing leads to another, and there's all kinds of other devices within. And so the next one is called the Vanishing Isles of the Summer King. This one's really special too, because this one is written and illustrated by Jonathan Bingham, who's been doing work on Hyperborea artwork for years, but he always wanted to write an adventure for us. And he did, and he wrote a great one. I described some of it earlier, how it takes place in multiple locales. And so it's sort of it sort of functions as yet another sort of mystery in which a druidic cult from centuries ago set up on these islands, but they've since gone missing, and they broke off from the mainstream druidic hierarchy. And so they're being sought out, and it turns into this great world jumping affair. As you can see there, the cover is by Val Simex, who's been doing great work for us for many years. Val is famous for mostly for his comic book work. He drew Lobo for years, Demon. He used to draw for Savage Sword of Conan. He drew Conan the Barbarian. He's had his hands in many titles over the years, Justice League of America, all kinds of stuff. If you look him up. So he did the cover for it, and so Jonathan Bingham, his wife Daisy, did the color work on that cover, and she's a fantastic watercolor painter and instructor, and so she brings another type of depth to our artwork when she adds her color talents to it. But it's pretty cool that Jonathan Bingham, it's the first time we've ever had an adventure in which the writer is also the artist. So he really brings his unique vision to this adventure. And John is really inspired by the works of like Jack Kirby and Michael Moorcock and a variety of other really cool and far out stuff. And he brings that to this adventure. So I think anyone who's a fan of Hyperborea is going to find that each of these adventures really offer something that we haven't offered before, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds to me like this third adventure here, Vanishing Isles of the Summer King, really has something for those of you out there who are big into Barsoom. So if that's your speed, it sounds like this is really going to have something here for you.
Yeah, definitely. If you're into that type of, that pulp fiction sort of, otherworldly jumps to other worlds that is like as John Carter did in those stories, then yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Now, when it comes to working with these other creators who are contributing these modules to the project, we've got a couple questions here in chat that people are asking. First one here is from Rex Teal, and he wants to know when you approach your writers for these adventures, do you typically have a page count or page limit that you want them to stick within, or kind of try to be around, or do you give them a lot of freedom in how long their adventures end up being?
I used to, until this project. So we reached a moment with these where it was like, well, the word count blew beyond what we were comfortable using in a saddle stitch book for two of the adventures.
Yeah.
And yeah, could I have less art? Yes. Could I shrink fonts so people have to squint at the pages? Yes. Decrease margins? Yes. You can do all those things and maybe pull it off. But I decided that, I really like the quality and presentation that we've had in the past. And if I'm to continue within that sort of style, that we had to go to a different format than saddle stitch for two of these three adventures. So I generally do, and I generally look to have a word count that is, say, anywhere from 16,000 to say 25,000 words, and that can fit nicely into a saddle stitch book. And this was sort of an experiment doing hardcover adventure books. I know a lot of publishers do it, and it's a regular thing for them, but I've always sort of embraced these shorter style adventures. And to go to something of this, a little bit of a bigger format for two of these three, was something of an experiment for Northwind Adventures. And I'm happy to say that it went really well, because we funded in 5 or 6 hours for the project, and it's still doing well.
Yeah. And then we've got another question here in chat from Dundermoose. How fierce are you with the Surface Pros? Is there a house style that people are encouraged to sound like?
Yes, there is. So the house style is, so my expectations as the publisher and the creator of the Hyperborea setting is that anyone who would write for it, author an adventure for it or any other type of supplement, would be familiar with the works of H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith. You can't just say like, oh, I want to write a sword and sorcery adventure, and I'm going to adapt my my high fantasy Tolkien style adventure to this, but I've never read any of those authors. It wouldn't really work that way for this setting. What I want is that sort of familiar territory that you, as a writer, author of these types of adventures, are also passionate about reading Howard and Lovecraft and Smith. And also the other part of that too is being a student of the works of Gary Gygax and his peers throughout the 70s and 80s, and the stylings that they were using for their adventure writing.
Yeah, it's something that I really appreciate about your work is you are more so than anyone else that I've encountered directly steeped in the kind of Appendix N lore. And it really comes across well in Hyperborea. As someone who holds that work very dearly for very personal reasons, I really appreciate what you do in regards to sticking closely to that subject matter.
Yeah, it's like I do enjoy a lot of the Appendix N authors, and I actually probably enjoy almost all of them. But
Hmm.
this is a little bit more of a tighter focus than saying all the Appendix N
Yeah.
writers. Now, there are definitely other Appendix N writers whose works have been very influential to this setting. Fritz Leiber, Jack Vance, Michael Moorcock. Um, I don't know if Carl Edward Wagner's on the list. I don't, is he? I'm not sure about him,
I don't remember.
but I mean, I love his stuff as well.
Hmm.
Uh, and authors such as Abraham Merritt, Edgar Rice Burroughs,
Yeah.
all that stuff has a place in Hyperborea. In this, something in the setting that touches on the works of one of those authors at some point in the work. It
Hmm.
might be a land, it might be a city, it might be a deity, it could be any of those things,
Yeah. And then just as far as rewards that people can get, you are able to get individual adventures here if you want, the PDFs of just one of these. You can also get print versions, and then there are bundle versions as well, both in PDF and physical form.
Right.
So lots of different options for those of you who want to support Jeff and his work, and whether it's all the adventures that interest you or just one that sounds particularly interesting,
Sure.
there are plenty of options available for you to support this particular work.
Yeah, that's right. And like I said, each of the adventures sort of fleshes out a different spot in Hyperborea, and all of our adventures really do that. They take place somewhere in Hyperborea. But
Mhm.
one of the strengths that I feel about the setting is that the way we set it up was that there are a lot of open spaces in the setting. There are unnamed towns. There are stretches of land that aren't named. And the reason for that is so that the individual game referees out there can create their own stuff in Hyperborea. So
Mhm.
it's as detailed as you want it to be. If you want to use a module that takes place in a certain part and fleshes out a part of the setting, and it's as open as you want it to be if you want to just have that stretch of land or that area of mountains or a few islands or whatever, and you decide, hey, I want to write my own thing that takes place here and run it for my crew, or I want to use this adventure that was published by a different publisher and use that in Hyperborea.
Mhm.
So it is adaptable.
Yeah. And as Rex Teal is pointing out here in chat, kind of like each module is almost like a mini setting in and of itself. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, you could say so, because some of them will have a complete town that's presented. We don't detail every little part of a town, but you give the most interesting characters and the most interesting places. And so yeah, they do function as mini settings. In particular, the Anthropophagi of Zambala is a great starting adventure, and it has this great little city that has um, a corrupt government, and it has a temple of Helios, and you have cannibals living out in the desert outside the city, and it's this whole adventure that is inspired by the Robert E. Howard story Shadows over Zambula.
Mhm. Gotcha. So to once again, just to let people know, you can find this on Kickstarter right now. There are 13 days to go in the campaign. The link is once again going to be in chat, and we'll come back to this at the end of the show just to remind everyone that it's out there. But there's another topic that I wanted to address with you on the show here, And as I said at the top of the show, this is my last show before we all converge on the West End in Irving, Texas, for uh, what ends up being the highlight of many of our years, and that is a North Texas RPG convention.
Yeah, I will be there as well.
Yep. It's always a good time. It's always fun. It's great to see everyone that's out there. However, this year is a little bit different for me personally. In the past, I've attended to make connections, but really, if I'm being honest with myself, I've been attending as a fan. This year, I'm still obviously a fan of role playing games, but with Guts and Glory kind of stepping out with our first Kickstarter concluded, and even a module that's available on Drive Through RPG right now, I'm not so much in the same role that I was now, and so I have to approach the convention differently. You are someone who's been attending conventions as a creator for a long time. You
Yes.
are a seasoned veteran of the RPG world, and so I want to talk a little bit about some of the differences in how you approach gaming at conventions, how you approach networking, just all of that from the pros perspective.
Sure, yeah. So my history goes back a little. It's a strange, convoluted history because I started going to conventions, just to play some games many years ago. But I also used to attend comic book conventions and walk around and buy comic books and stuff like that. And I enjoyed both kinds of conventions. And back in the 1990s, I decided to open up a comic book and role playing game shop. And so I did that for a number of years and started to attend conventions as a retailer. And so I got to see sort of how things function from that end of the spectrum. And then eventually I tired of that and wanted to go into the more creative side of things and started to work in the role playing game industry and started to go to conventions with the idea of like, hey, I'm not just going to walk around here and play some games and then go to the bar and drink. I'm going to actually run some games of material that I've either already done or material that maybe is in the pipeline later and try to immerse other gamers into the type of content that I've been working on and see if they like it as well and see what kind of adjustments need to be made. And you also, I think, some of the stuff that you start to do from the networking side of things is you talk to other writers, you talk to other publishers, you talk to artists, and you start to get a feel for how they operate, what their expectations are, and they're all different. You can meet an artist who does some type of art year round as their full-time gig, that they paint or they do graphic design and they do role-playing game work, and art is their complete vocation. And then you can meet other artists that do it as a part-time thing on the side, but they're no less passionate about it than full-time artists are, but they might have a family to support and need that regular income. So I guess what my point is in a roundabout way is you meet different people from different backgrounds who all have something that they can contribute to you, as far as ideas and networking, and you can really learn a lot. I think the best thing starting off as you are from this perspective is to probably be a sponge and
Yeah.
really listen to people, even the people who start to say things that maybe you don't completely agree with or don't plan to ever really do. It's still cool to hear what different people have to say about the publishing world.
Yep. To focus a little bit on the game running side of things, because I'm finding myself in this position this year. I'm running 3 sessions of what's likely going to be material for the next volume of Guts and Glory.
Okay.
Um, so I'm approaching my games with kind of this play test mentality. And I
Yes.
know that when you set out to play test, you're looking for feedback, but there's always this question of what's good feedback and what's bad feedback. So just to turn that over to you, what's the most valuable feedback that you can get from a just kind of like a blind play test at a convention?
You know, if you ask a 5 different people that question, you'll probably get 5 different answers. I tend to be the type that internalizes things and take notes. This isn't working. Well, this needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. And oh, they okay. One of the things about as everybody knows, and anyone who's watching this video knows, is the tabletop role playing games are not defined by any parameters like a video game is. So when you're running a game, people can do the most outlandish shit that you've never would have expected,
Yeah.
and you can never account for every possible contingency. So
Mhm.
what you have to do is really, map out some of the ones that are the most likely to happen so that you can have a little bit of guidance, but you still have to, figure that this is an open parameter situation. And so, yeah, some people I know, when they're running something that's a play test, when the game is over, they like to ask the players, "How did that go? What would you have liked to have seen different? Would you have liked to have seen more action? Would you have liked to see less action, a little more interaction, role playing with some of the non-player characters, or would you have wanted more mystery and exploration?" You can ask those things, and you'll get, you might get a lot of um, different opinions from people, and you may get opinions that you agree with and opinions that you disagree with. So yeah, I guess you have to take it all with a grain of salt. Some people have some great ideas, because a lot of the people who sit down to play a game at a convention, a lot of them are the constant GM of their own games.
Yeah.
And that's their opportunity. Like, I'm going to a convention and this is where I get to play, I get to be the guy who just kicks back and enjoys, and doesn't have to run the show. And
Mhm.
so what you end up having is a lot of experienced hands at doing this sort of thing, and they know what's right and they know what's not working, because they have been doing it for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years themselves. So I think it can be valuable to have those conversations with people, but you also can't take it personally, because some people are going to enjoy just criticizing you for the sake of criticizing you, because you've now given them that platform to do so.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful not to like take it to heart that you're going to run into some guy who's going to want to be a jerk about it. And that happens from time to time. Not everyone's perfect. Uh,
Mhm.
but I guess my primary advice to you would be to just be a sponge and take it all in, and you can talk to them, but you can also internalize it and sort of figure it out yourself along the way, what's working and what's not working.
Mhm. Yeah, the one question, and I've asked this question, I've asked this question before, um, and the feedback I get from this is never, um, it it's never anything valuable, unfortunately. The dreaded "Did you have fun?" question, because for a majority of the people at the table, the answer is going to be yes. Like,
They
yes,
don't
I
want to be
had.
rude,
Yeah.
so you have to read their body language, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Did you have fun? Yes. Yeah, they're not gonna be mean to the guy that just ran a game for
Right.
them. But
But then they'll tear you apart on Twitter.
yeah, just I realize that I have to like dig a little bit deeper, and there's a couple games where I know some of the people that are playing will give me good feedback, so I'm not scared of asking them for feedback. But you do
Sure.
bring up a good point, um, when you talk about um, just this mentality that a lot of people have when they come into these games, and that's they don't get to play very often. They don't get to roll dice as often as they might like. For a lot of people, I think it's an unfortunate reality that coming to conventions like this is the only time of year they actually get to play. So when you when you bring those people to the table, um, they're going to enjoy almost anything that you put in front of them, and you have to like keep that in mind as part of your solicitation of feedback.
Right. The other thing I think you need to take into account is when you're playing a con game, you're playing a short form version of whatever you have. If you have a 32-page module, you're not running that whole damn thing during a convention session. It's impossible. You're running a portion of it, or you're running a stripped down version of it. You're running it fast play. You're intentionally avoiding certain parts of it that you think you don't want the players to be engaging with this set of non-player characters or whatever for the first hour of play when you only have a 4-hour session. So you tend to want to get them to the action quicker. And so I feel like a lot of times a convention, as fun as it is, may not always be the best representation of what your adventure module really is for the long-term campaign play, whether it's folks that play every week, or they play once a month, or they play on some virtual tabletop format, or whatever they do. When you're 32, if you have a 32-page module, they might play that thing over 5 or 6 sessions of play. So you're really not getting the full perspective out of a con that you would over a active campaign play, I think.
Right. Yeah. And the other interesting thing that you bring up, and this is something I think that every creator dreads, but I think every creator should also cherish, is this kind of destructive mentality that players will approach the game with.
Oh yeah.
Because, like you said, it's not an ongoing campaign. It's kind of a whose line situation. Everything's made up, and the points don't matter. So you can kind of come into a game like this and act like a total dick and just knock everything over, set the town on fire, and you won't have to deal with any lasting ramifications
Right.
besides
Because it's just a con game.
Yeah, it's just a con game. So allowing players to do stuff like that and just to see, like, how does what I have written here, how does what I have conceptualized for this adventuring area or this dungeon, or whatever it is you're running, how does that react to someone who's coming in and being a complete and total anarchist, burning everything down? It's kind of the like, okay, give me your worst case scenario situation for a lot of creators.
Well, I tend to think that it's rare that you're going to find an entire group that has that mindset.
Right.
So I think that when you worry about that yourself as the person running the game, you're putting too much of a burden on yourself, because what you'll find is you have allies in the other players who know that you've worked hard on something, and they respect the prep that you put into it, and they're going to attempt to usually facilitate smoother gameplay, and because gamers are great like that. Because when you look at the very heart of what we do in this hobby, it's creative collaboration. So when someone wants to just be an anarchist and destroy the whole thing and cause the session to really go, off left field or whatever, then I think that the fellow players will try to reel it in themselves in a lot of cases. But there are other little smaller micro versions of what you're saying that you should always take into account when you're running a con game. And it's funny because I was just having this conversation with my buddy Dennis this morning. If you have a pre-gen and you have like a wand of polymorph, you don't want it to have like 52 charges on it, right? Because they're going to use that thing over and over and over again. Because why? Because it's a con game. You gave it to them with 52 charges. Why won't they just keep using it? So you give it to them with 1 or 2 charges, and then they're really selective about when they do it in there, because they have no reason to use the kind of resource management that we would normally use in campaign play. So there's little things that you need to do, as as the game referee or game master or DM to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen.
I think Dennis is actually in chat with us here. Says that he ruined Ernie Gygax's game with that wand.
There he is. That's funny. That is Dennis. That's hilarious.
Yes, I mean, something I found, and this is what I try to foster at my home table, but also just any table that I run. Yes, like there's this element of, dude, why are you doing this, when someone really just wants to kind of blow everything up and act like that anarchist, especially in a con game. But something that I found really effective is not trying to encourage the players that, you know, just to always act as a cohesive unit. Now, a con game's different because everyone's got different expectations when they go in there.
Right.
Everyone wants to have a good time. You want to facilitate fun for people who paid good money to be there and play in your game. But I like to facilitate this idea of, you guys are all essentially in a temporary alliance of convenience. You're all in this for an equal split of the treasure, but at any moment, some of you could decide to do something different, or you could decide that you don't want to work with these bozos anymore. And so
Right.
at that point, the game doesn't devolve at that point. It just changes into something. It changes almost into a Bronstein type situation where now each player acts as an individual faction. And you
Right.
do have those moments where the players will team up with each other and say, look, we don't like what this guy's doing. Neither of our characters would be down for this. So we're going to, you know, combine forces and take care of this problem. I think just letting players know that, you know, that's on the table will keep the problems in check, but also encourage players to think about things in a different way.
Yeah, because now there are plots within plots, right?
Yes.
You have the adventure itself, but you also have the as you said, the sort of factions within factions where they may have, you can supply them with different motivations. Many years ago, I played in a Frank Menser game that was in which it was the party was comprised of all monks. So there were like 8 of us playing. So he randomly handed out these monk character sheets, right? And 2 of us got evil monks. I happened to be one of them. And so he asked which players got these specific names of these monks, and he took us aside and he said, at some point during the adventure, you 2 have to betray the party, do something, screw them over in some way, you know. So, you know, it was one of those types of situations where you don't want to do it too early because it could kind of ruin things. So we decided to say, you know, we'll wait towards the end of the session before we try to, you know, do something. And, you know, I forget exactly what we did. We did something that would attract some type of enemy monster to the rest of the party and took off, you know, while the monster was attacking them, type of situation. But, you know, you can have those kinds of interesting situations in gameplay. It doesn't always have to be the typical party of adventurers that start at point A and go to point Z and, you know, walk away with their treasure. You can have that sort of intrigue within the adventure.
Yeah. Now to pivot away from running games for a little bit, let's talk a little bit about the networking aspect. You mentioned the kind of like diversity of essentially creative walks of life that you'll encounter at conventions. And one of the things that I love about North Texas in particular is the special guests and the regular attendees are all mixed together. There's not a great amount of separation between the people who are invited and the people who paid to be there.
Right.
So you have situations where you're walking down the hallway and you will randomly walk by like a Jeff D or a Zeb Cook or someone like that, and you will get the opportunity to talk to those folks.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people, even someone approaching you, looking to talk shop? What advice do you have for people who uh, are shy about approaching these folks for discussion of their work, essentially?
Well, you know, I felt like I really learned my lesson with that when I worked for Gary Gygax and I saw the way he operated at Gen Con with fans of his work. And, I looked at him as like this sort of, and a lot of people did, as this superstar, this creative superstar, famous type of creator that we all looked up to and idolized for years. And when he would sit at the Troll Lord Games booth at the time, in the mid 2000s, and sign autographs, I was really impressed by how he would listen to people's stories about their games. He would listen to people who would say, I met my wife through playing D&D, or, it helped me, D&D helped me learn how to read because I couldn't read until I started, going through these books over and over, and all kinds of other things. And he would treat every one of them like an equal and like a peer. And I like to try to take that lesson to heart, and I hope that other creators do, and I know guys like Zeb Cook do. Anyone can walk up, and Zeb is a superstar himself. The things that he's created over the years, it's an amazing resume of works that he's done. And yet you can walk right up to him and say, hey Zeb, I really liked, maybe you were a fan of some of his Conan stuff from Marvel back in the day, or second edition D&D, or whatever the case may be. And Zeb will talk to you about it, and he'll treat you like anybody else. He'll treat you like a peer, that we're all just gamers and creating cool stuff to share with each other. Everyone was a player at one time. Everyone was a dungeon master at one time. And so, yeah, some people make the jump over to the creative side of things, but that doesn't mean that we're, not, regular gamers still too,
Right.
So that's, I think I consider myself accessible. And I think that most of the guys that are from that generation before me to also be accessible.
Mhm. Yeah, and in my experience, almost everyone has been extremely accessible. You have obviously been very kind to me on a personal level, and even helping me out with this last campaign that I did. Um, Levi Combs has been indispensable in just kind
Yeah,
of
he's
like
great.
talking me through stuff. Ian McGarty had a whole conversation with me when I was first trying to put stuff together, and everyone's been super cool. I mean, like Jim Wampler is basically the reason why Wonky and I are working together right now. So I've had a good experience getting advice from creators and using that to put together my own creation. So I do encourage anyone who is aspiring to go up to these people. Obviously you want to ask intelligent questions. You want to make the most of your time, but don't be afraid to approach these professionals and
Yeah,
ask the burning questions that you have about getting started.
right. I think that that's great. I think that, especially an intimate setting like North Texas, where you only have like 500 or 600 people, hanging out, and so it's the ratio of game creators to regular gamers walking in. It's a large amount of uh, creative people, much more than you would get from, say, a Gen Con or something like that. So at a North Texas, you have this unique opportunity to just mingle and play games. And in a lot of cases, you can be sitting in a game to play that you signed up for or maybe walked up to. And a couple of those guys will be there, just fellow players, and that's how you end up chatting with them and getting to know them because of the intimate setting that it is.
Now, another aspect of kind of convention life is if you've got work out there, kind of getting people's attention. And there are right ways to do this, and there are wrong ways to do this. Without naming names or getting specific, do you have any examples of perhaps the wrong way to get attention at a convention like North Texas?
I don't know. I would say that anyone that seeks to get attention by being negative towards someone else or something else, that like negativity doesn't breed any type of, optimistic work or relationship in the future, because if you come across, I think, as someone who's complaining about something or saying why something is bad, then instead of complaining about why you think something is bad, show what you have that you think could be good. I think that positivity can outweigh negativity in a lot of those instances.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just for me personally, and seeing what other people have done, not specifically at North Texas. I think people have actually been pretty good about this at North Texas, but negativity, like don't be negative, like you said, and also don't make other people's existence in your vicinity a living hell.
Right, right. Yeah, that comes with, having some self-awareness in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
Know the room, because occasionally you can be at a con and in the it could be kids around, and someone's is just being completely obnoxious in front of, some man or woman's kids that are right there. And so that's never a comfortable situation. You hate to tell people to tone it down, take it easy. But, some people, like we were saying earlier, they get so amped up at being at a con that they, forget the normal, would you say that in, your cousin's house or something like
Yeah.
that? It's just like, you have to just have a little bit of self-awareness, I think.
Mhm. And not to disrupt the flow of the conversation here, but just wanted to shout out everyone. Jonathan Bingham, the writer and artist of Vanishing Isles of the Summer King, is here in chat with us tonight. So, Jonathan,
Hey,
thank you for
Jonathan.
tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We were just talking about you a little while ago. All good stuff, of course.
Yep. So we've talked a little bit about getting attention, getting noticed. We've talked about networking. Um, what other advice for creators attending conventions like this would you have that we haven't touched on, or what has been helpful in your career as far as interacting with other creators, or making the most out of the time that you spend at conventions?
Sure, I can give you an example that's actually kind of funny. At a Gary Con a few years ago, more than a few years ago at this point, my buddy Donovan was running a game of Hyperborea, and while he was running the game, um, there was a guy that was playing in his game who was making sketches while the game was going on. And after their session was over, he took a look at some of those sketches, and they blew his mind. He thought they were amazing. So meanwhile, I was at the booth selling books and whatnot, and so he brought over this gentleman to meet me. He's like, "You have to check out his art," and so he showed me his book, and I thought, "Yeah, that's great. We should hook up and do some art for me." He was like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." So ever since then, I've had a gentleman by the name of Mick Furnett, who's been doing great work for me, and he's been doing work, up up to these last 3 adventure modules. Well, not Jonathan's, because Jonathan did all his own art, but Mick did. He's been doing illustration work for me ever since. So I guess to answer your question is, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Yeah, maybe what you do is not for everybody, but you may find that if you just, show what you have or pitch your ideas to people, they might actually be interested. Some people might brush you off and say that's not for me or whatever, but that's fine. You can't take it personally. You always remember that they are um, not into your art or your writing per se, but that doesn't mean they're putting you down as a person. You can't take it personally. It is still business in many senses.
Right.
But you don't be afraid to try to make those connections. I've talked to a lot of artists can tend to be on the shy side or introverted side, and that's normal. So what a lot of artists will do is they will show up at a convention and they'll just walk around and play games, and so I would say to them, why don't you bring a binder with some of your art and show it around? And they're too shy to do it or whatever, and so I think you have to try to get beyond that sort of shyness and just put yourself out there. And I know it's tough for some people because it's hard to be, because some people are jerks, and you have to sort of steel yourself to the idea that someone might not be kind to you. But for the most part, you're going to find good constructive criticism, or you might find that walking around with your art is going to get you your next gig. And so I think it's all cool ways to connect, and conventions are a great place to do that at. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, you have to be kind of open and receptive to essentially what you could encounter, or who you could cross paths with. In my own experience, last year, I knew, and I'm going to talk again about Wonky like I do on the show all the time, because he's my best friend and everything. I did not know him very well at all last year. I was talking to Rocky. I was talking to Rocky Gardner,
Yeah.
and he walked up, and we just kind of started talking, just as part of this conversation that he joined in between myself and Rocky. And then later we met up at the bar and started talking again, and that's when I kind of let him know what I was working on with Nighthaven. He talked to me a little bit about Bellafallo, and we found out that we had a lot of creative goals in common.
Right.
We shared a passion for the same kind of genre and era of fantasy. I found out that he was as big a Solomon Kane fan as I am.
That's so funny. I was just watching the movie today.
I watched it a couple days ago for the first time.
Because it's been on Tubi, and I put it on. But yeah, I love that. I feel like it's one of the most, again, anyway, go on. I feel it's a great movie anyway, good representation.
It is a really good movie, and I will come back to that in just a second. But we got talking, we got connected. I got him on Rollin Bones, and then we had the conversation with Jim Wampler that got us to where we are today. So that all happened because I didn't just kind of like walk away from a conversation when someone else walked up. I sat there, engaged with Wonky, as he, and he was open to engaging with me as well, someone he didn't know all that well. So a partnership was forged out of just two people randomly running into each other at North Texas.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because, in this world of internet and social media and everything else, it just lacks that sort of personal touch. There's no replacing hanging out at a bar with a bunch of people and striking up that sort of connection and relationship in which you can end up becoming creative collaborators with each other. And those conversations, and especially in a setting like North Texas, I don't think that you can replicate those kinds of things on the internet or through
No.
Facebook Messenger or something of that sort. It's just not the same. So that's why it kind of goes back to my point a little earlier about putting yourself out there. That if you don't put yourself out there, you're not as like if you didn't go to that con, there's probably zero chance that you and Wonky would have ever forged this partnership. you know.
Right.
So that's why I think that, attending these things is an important component of the fulfilling your aspirations to getting into the creative side of these things.
Yeah. And part of that, just part of that openness, or part of that, being willing to kind of go with the flow. If you are looking at the creative side of role playing games and you want to venture into that, even if you're not that much of a drinker, I cannot recommend enough that you just hang out near the bar, even if you're just drinking water.
Right.
That's where the interesting conversations and the happenstance meetings are more than likely to happen, because
Yep.
you'll get people who have their guard down. They've got a drink in their hands. They're absolutely over the moon to just be with their people, and you'll have some great conversations. So
Absolutely.
don't discount that time spent around the hotel bar. And I found that out last year. I had some of the best times of the convention just like hanging out in the bar.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. They do some cool stuff there too. They do like they have a thing one of the nights where they do like this sort of art free for all where people all riff off each other doing some type of I don't want to say it's an art contest, but it's like an improv session in which they feed off each other, and it's actually pretty cool what some of the people will come up with. They do different stuff like that. Maybe not necessarily always like North Texas per se, but different cons, that kind of stuff will go on, and I think it has its value. Great ways to connect.
Yeah. And it's like, Harrius, you mentioned a great this is one of the struggles of meeting up with people in the bar. You do have to kind of pay attention to the conversation that you're having. It's easy to get distracted, and it's easy to lose track of things, especially when you have a very intoxicated Ryan talking to a slightly less intoxicated James Shields. So
Right.
that's that's something that you could encounter at North Texas. But yeah, I mean, it really is a great convention. It's a great time, and I wish I was there right now. Honestly, like I wish
I
this
do too,
Tuesday
but
was
I
next
gotta
Tuesday.
finish putting my pre-gens together.
Yeah, same here.
It's always the last thing that I need to wait. I don't want to use the same pre-gens that I've always used. I want to use some different ones this time around.
Now you mentioned the Solomon Kane movie, and I have
Oh,
to
yeah,
I
yeah.
have to say this just because I watched it for the first time just a few days ago, and I haven't been able to talk about it with anyone. But you brought it up, so we're gonna do this here.
Sure.
Um, I love the movie. I thought it was a great representation of how Solomon became the Solomon Kane that we see in Howard's stories. The
Right.
only problem that I had with it is at the end of the movie, once everything's wrapped up, and you see at the very end of the movie, he puts on his hat and he climbs on his horse and rides off. The only thought that I had was I want to immediately put on the adaptation of Red Shadows that was never made.
Right. Right. I know. I know. He really did a great job. Was his name James Purfoy or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah. He really, his representation of that character was great, and you know his his quest for justice, and the the um the Puritan. I would have loved to see more. It's a shame that they didn't, because they had this sort of tantalizing you know mentions here and there that there was going to be a follow-up movie, but I guess it just never happened.
mhm. Unfortunately, that movie was it was kind of the last in an era of fantasy movies. Some people are going to get mad at me for mentioning it alongside these particular movies, but it came out within the same window as League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Van Helsing, even kind of the Jason Momoa Conan movie was really like the last of this particular wave of kind of mid to low budget fantasy movies that were coming out in
Right.
the mid to late 2000s. Unfortunately, most of those movies are not very well regarded, and some of them
Right.
deserve their reputation, but I think a lot of them are pretty unfairly crapped on these days.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Van Helsing stuff was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Um, I enjoyed Jason Momoa as Conan, but I thought the script was horrible.
Agreed.
The story just kind of stunk, and the dialogue was bad, and it was just very cliche. And it frustrated me because over and over and over, I always say, why can't they just adapt a Howard story and make a movie out of it? Make a movie out of the Tower of the Elephant. That would be brilliant, right? It would have all the things that that a true Howard fan would want, first of all. So you would have all those people roped in, and I think it has enough to attract and entertain a general audience that knows nothing about those stories. You can do that with, I mean, a story like Red Nails. There's so many great stories that can be adapted, but just for some reason, it's like, all right, we're gonna take this great franchise, this great character that all these people love, but forget about all those people that love this thing. We're gonna create our own origin story for it. We're gonna slap on an origin, and I don't know.
Mhm.
What are you gonna do? We still have the books.
Yeah, if I were going to do Conan, I would actually do it. I wouldn't do a movie. I would do it as a series, and it would pretty much be a like a 70s throwback series, because I would make it in the style of Kung Fu or The Incredible Hulk, where the Conan is basically the only consistency. It's just this guy kind of wandering through uh Hyboria, um getting into adventures, kind of stumbling upon
Right.
the different stories, do adaptations for certain episodes, do original stories for others.
Sure. I
um
suppose you could do that.
Unfortunately, TV shows aren't made that way
I
anymore.
know.
There's this
I've
focus
thought
on
about it
having.
myself. I've thought about myself too a number of times, and I've thought that, if it were to be done, what I would like to see, and Howard wrote about this in one of his letters, and when he talked about the lack of Conan being presented from his youth to when he was older, he looked at it as though these were stories being told by a campfire, and that they would be that the teller of the story, just like any organic teller of a story, would bounce around in different points of that person's life, and it wouldn't necessarily be from the beginning all the way to the end. So that's why you have a story like The Phoenix and the Sword being the first chronological Conan story that he wrote, being an older Conan. And but then you can go to a story like Tower of the Elephant, which is maybe it's either that or the Frost Giant's daughter that is the youngest Conan. And so you can see the stories jumping in different points in his life. And I think for like, if they did it in a series, that could be done really well, where you jump to different points of his life.
Mhm.
And like you said too, you can get creative with it too. You can have some filler stories that aren't necessarily a Howard tale, but if you get people who respect the source material enough and don't want to push their own agenda onto the character, then it could be done well.
Yep. Yeah, certainly. And for those of you who want to get your pulp fantasy fix, sounds like a Scooter for Mike here in chat is hosting a book club on Saturday nights, and they're currently going through all of the Conan and Lovecraft stories.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Give us a link.
Yeah, Mike, drop a link to your channel here in chat so I can stick it up here. But yes, good for Mike. Does a lot of good content, and I'm glad that he's doing something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's great too because as we all as fans of those guys know, they were good friends, Howard and Lovecraft. I have a series, a 2-volume series of letters that they exchanged with one another, and they, I would say more Howard than Lovecraft borrowed. Howard borrowed from Lovecraft a lot, and brought more of his cosmic horror themes into some of his own stories. Not necessarily Conan, well, with some a little bit Conan too, but um, maybe more stuff like with Bran McMorn and some of his weird West tales that he did, the horror in the mound and stuff like that. But you can see the Lovecraft influence that was building in Howard's works and a lot, and I think that was just them sort of riffing off each other because they were good buddies and they were pen pals.
hmm. Their friendship has always fascinated me, because I know the stock that Howard came from, and I know the environment that Howard grew up in. Um, just from doing my own research into my family history, um, you have two men who are both basically American founding stock, but completely different sides of that founding stock. Because Howard was the Southern Scots Irish planter, and
Right,
Lovecraft was English aristocracy,
right,
and so this northeastern man who's afraid to kind of leave his house, who is descended from Puritan aristocracy, has this pen pal friendship with kind of a rough and tumble Texan who was probably in more than one fist fight in his life, and just the way that these two were interacting with each
right.
other fascinates me endlessly.
Me too. But if you don't mind, I would correct you on one thing though.
Okay.
I think it is a misnomer when people say that Lovecraft was afraid to leave his home. I think that's a popular culture thing, and that when you read his letters and you read the stuff that he exchanged with other writers and other people that he was friends with, he was actually a pretty well-traveled guy, mostly throughout New England. But he was, I believe, maybe the farthest he went from his home in Rhode Island was maybe Ohio. But he did get around. He lived in New York City for a time when he was married, and so he wasn't like some cloistered guy that just didn't leave his home. I think that's somewhat of a mistake. But anyway, getting back to their relationship, one of the things that I found fascinating about reading the letters exchanged between those two was that in the early going, Howard was very deferential to Lovecraft. He kind of looked at him as the big weird tales author, and that he was like the leader of this circle of writers, and he was, very well respected in their pulp fiction circles. And so he was very deferential to him in those early letters. And
Hmm.
as you go on reading the letters, it becomes less formal, and they start to sort of sometimes go head to head with each other on their philosophies in life, because Howard was the real deal when it came to his beliefs on barbarism versus civilization. He really did feel that stuff, and Lovecraft was the exact opposite. Lovecraft felt that the epitome of civilization was represented by the peak of the Roman Empire. And so Howard was naturally against that sort of thing. And to see them argue about it, and they would not just argue about it, but they would cite sources, and they would go on for pages and pages in their letters, you know, citing their sources of why this was better than that, or what. And it's just like this fascinating dialogue between the two, during the age of the letters. And these days it would be a Twitter exchange or something like that. That would a
Yeah.
never-ending Twitter argument to something. But back then it was these letters, and we're lucky enough that most of them were preserved, that we can actually, get inside of their thoughts and see what was going on between them.
Hmm. Yeah, I often wonder if whenever whenever Howard wrote about kind of the civilized man and kind of eulogized what happened to man when he is civilized, if he wasn't in the back of his mind thinking a little bit about his, his friend Howard up in New England.
Right. One of the things Mark Finn in the Howard biography Blood and Thunder wrote about was, and I never really thought about this before. He really crystallized this thought, and he may not have been the person who originated it, but he was the first one that I read that wrote about this. And what he was talking about was Howard living in a boom town in Cross Plains, Texas. It went from this little backwater town where there was nothing there, and when they found black gold in that area, this town suddenly grew up around him. And what ended up happening was he saw it go from this quaint, happy little place into seeing the worst examples of humanity showing up to live there. So to him, that was the the growing of civilization around him, and what civilization meant to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. I'm definitely butchering what Mark Finn wrote about. I would recommend to anyone watching this, if you're a fan of biographies of some of our favorite authors, check out Blood and Thunder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and along with that, Robert E. Howard really kind of writes about honestly, you can look at his work as a encapsulation of the postbellum, post Reconstruction South, because his family, and again, saying this as someone who is distantly part of that family, um, the world in which the Howards arrived and then expanded in was very much agrarian, very much tamed by the sweat of your brow and your ability to kind of like keep yourself alive and sustain yourself.
Right.
And then there comes a war which a lot of people who in that particular era, in that particular geographic location, would have seen as an invasion from the outside. And now civilization is being imposed upon them,
Right.
By an occupying force. And so this is the consciousness that Howard grew up in, and this would have informed his worldview in a lot of ways, especially combined with growing up in a boom town. So
right.
That's a lot of what you see in Howard's writing as well.
Yeah, and you think also about like his dad, right? His dad, Dr. Howard, he was he was a practicing doctor, but it was during a time when he wasn't billing his patients. He was going to their homes. He was providing a service, and they were maybe giving him, a batch of eggs for coming over to do it, or whatever the case may be. It was this, it was the trade and barter system of that day that was is foreign to our way of thinking, 100 years later.
Yep. Looks like we've got a $2 super chat here. Mercurius Alicus. I'm sorry, butchering Latin here. Crafty Matt says hi. Crafty Matt's a good friend of mine in chat, so he wants to say hi to you, Jeff.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah, always good to hear from him. How you doing, Matt?
Crafty sends his regards.
Excellent.
Well, unfortunately, we are kind of running up against our time here. So one more time, just for the benefit of those of you who have joined late, want to remind all of you that Modulistic Terror is still on Kickstarter. It is here in the chat. It will also be pinned below this video in the pinned comment. You got 13 days, so the better part of 2 weeks to jump on this. And you will also be able to see both myself and Jeff at North Texas RPG Convention. Jeff, what do you have going on at NTX this year?
Something interesting. So this year, I rented a one of the what do you call it? The boardrooms. And in this boardroom, we're going to be running Hyperborea games all weekend. So it's going to be one big giant table, and it's a quiet setting. And myself and two other game referees are going to be running games there throughout the weekend. We're going to each take turns. So the way we sort of split it up is each of us will have a morning session, each of us will have an afternoon session, and each of us will have a night session of running games.
Mhm.
And so and then we're going to do a really fun thing. If you're in North Texas and you're not flying out early on Sunday morning, we're going to do what we're calling the Hyperborea Open in that boardroom. I think it's room 1014, if I'm not mistaken. That particular boardroom. It's the first when you go up the elevator to the first floor and the elevator doors open. It's the boardroom that's right across on the first floor of the hotel, not the ground floor where the regular con is. Anyway, so we're going to do the Hyperborea Open, and in the Hyperborea Open, we're going to have a bunch of game referees. I'm going to start it off, and we're going to do like an old school dungeon crawl in which one referee runs for about an hour or so, and then hands the baton to the next guy, and then that referee takes it from there and runs for about an hour or so, and so on and so forth. And people can pop in or pop out as they want, and it's going to be really low key. Beer and pretzel kind of game, and kind of like a end of the con hangout. So if you feel like stopping by for that, that should be a lot of fun. Otherwise, I think as far as our regular events go, I think they're all sold out. I believe when I checked last, there are 14 Hyperborea games in total, and so not just in that boardroom. That's just some of the games, and then there's other games in some of the other ballrooms of the con. And so just running a bunch of games, hanging out with friends such as you, Ryan, and just having a good time.
And if I'm not terribly mistaken, I believe my good friend Chance Dale is actually one of the referees that's going to be running with you. Is that right?
He's not in the boardroom, but I believe he's running a game out in one of the ballrooms.
Gotcha.
And maybe he's running more than one game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Chance runs a good game too. I know that people have really enjoyed his stuff.
He does. Chance is a great guy. So if you have a chance to, if you miss Jeff's games and you still want to get your Hyperborea fix, because I mean Jeff's are all sold out. If you can find a spot in Chance's game, he runs a great Hyperborea game as well. So
I think his is sold out too, actually.
That's North Texas, guys. What can I tell
right.
you?
But I would always say, always walk up to a game and see. Sometimes people will let an extra person squeeze in. Sometimes somebody doesn't show up. They overslept, or they just decided to wander off and do something else. People. It happens at conventions all the time. So don't be afraid to, if you see a game that looks interesting to you, and you don't have anything booked for that slot, go check it out and see if you can get in.
Cool. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on again tonight. This has been a great hang, great conversation, and I always enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, you as well, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, I will be off next week in preparation for going to North Texas. We will be back after that. Stay tuned for announcements for who is going to be on throughout the month of June. But until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard. Go back, Hyperborea Modulistic Terror on Kickstarter, and I will see you guys next time.